On. Hooray! We are live. Hello, everybody. Um, and now I will switch it to speaker view. I'm trying to do too many things at once. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Neil Daigle Oriens, and I am the visual arts manager here at Real Artways. We are really excited to have you here for this conversation between exhibiting artist Shannon VanGyzen, as well as the dancers from the Hartford Dance Collective and drag artists Severity Stone and Coleslaw. This has been a really fun and kind of trying process with COVID-19 and everything. But this is a project that we've been working on just about all year. And it finally came to be. And we have the filmed version on Vimeo, and it's just wonderful. So again, thank you all for attending. If at any point you have a question, feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, the bottom right, you'll see a Q&A button. You can send a question. I will be moderating, but we have a lot of voices and a lot of things to talk about, so we may not get to your question, and for that, I apologize ahead of time. But we will be happy to talk as much as we can while also being respectful for everybody's time. So with that in mind, we are going to get started. So we're going a little bit out of order tonight, and we are starting with the final piece in the film Family Reunion, which was called The Go-Getter. And The Go-Getter was choreographed by Savannah Jones. So Savannah, I would love for you to talk about what led you to choose that sculpture, and what led you to choose the song and things like that, and we can go from there.
All right, thank you so much, Neil. Thank you. So yes, my name is Savannah Jones, and my piece was, and the sculpture itself was entitled "The Go-Getter," and just by looking at it, it's a beautiful sculpture for one, and I love the color blue. I find blue very calming, very peaceful, and the go-getter. I like to view myself as a go-getter. I never really was that kind of person who like things came easy, or we all know somebody who like things just came easy for them, and that wasn't me. Not saying I had a hard life, but I really did have to like work for a lot of things and like where I am today, and I'm proud of that. It made me the person that I am. It kept me humble. It's how it plays in the way I treat people. So I treat people with a lot of respect, and that's how I gain a lot of patience, because I had to have a lot of patience for the things that I wanted in life, and I had to wait a lot for the things that came to me. So, but that never stopped me from just still plunging forward and going to get like the end goal. And in our mind, we have a vision of how we want to get there. Like we have our own 1, 2, 3 ABC. Somewhere at some point of time, something kind of comes in and derails, takes you on a detour, and it's just like, all right, you work with it, you let it get you down. There's more than one way you can handle that situation, but I refuse to let things like totally hold me back and totally hold me down and totally discourage me. It is human to get frustrated. It's very human to get angry. It's very human to take a pause and even question yourself. But I would say, yeah, another human trait is to stop and give up, but I'm not, I refuse to let that trait take place. So, yeah, the go-getter, you just go and you keep going, you keep moving. And I love the flow of the music. I love the tempo. It wasn't too crazy. It wasn't too slow. It's very chill. I can be a very chill person. Then there's some sporadic, spontaneous points. I can be a little sporadic and spontaneous. Who isn't? Who can't be? Again, I'm human. We're all human. So, it was just nice to have that music uh, orchestrate and be the mood music of what I was trying to portray. And then the dancers that I had working with me, um, Taylor and Joey, they're just phenomenal and very talented. And, they believed in me. They went with my vision. I asked for their input, and they just made things even more easier. So, I really had to go and get anything with them. I just had to ask and they gave it to me. So that's really cool. I dig that. So, I think sometimes in life, things like that can just flow very freely and just come to me. So I do thank them for that. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
So, Savannah, you said something earlier that I thought was really interesting, and I was hoping Shannon could actually talk a little bit about it. You had mentioned this notion of like never giving up and always hustling, and Shannon sent me this like really wonderful description of all of her pieces before this. So, Shannon, I was wondering if you could talk about the title of this piece, "The Go-Getter," and like why you came to that, because I think it has this really interesting connection that may not have been intentional, but like totally works.
Yeah, I was like surprised as well. I mean, it's kind of interesting because I didn't give any description of any of these sculptures to any of the dancers. You only had like a vague title, persona, so like the go-getter, and then even then some of these guys had like multiple names. So it was kind of interesting to see how you all interpreted it. But with the go-getter, I think so like physically it looks like like it has stretched legs and it's like really tall. And I kind of came up with that personality when I had like an open studio when I was at the Woodstock Birdcliff Guild. Oh yeah, let's take a look at it. It's not that one. This blue guy here. And one visitor said how it reminded her of like someone pulling their bootstraps up, like that expression. And it kind of like, it really resonated with me and made sense to me. So it kind of made sense to make that guy, the kid trying to kind of break maybe a like family cycle and kind of achieve like upward mobility, like if we're talking about class. Yeah, and that guy kind of reminds me of me as well. Like as a first generation college graduate and just like always, I don't know, something about it. I think like the stretched and it just, he's little, but there's something still regal about him somehow, or her, or they. I think that one doesn't really have a gender for me. But yeah.
Savannah too, talking about the movements, there are these like really strong moments like we see right here, and like those like kind of marching orders, and then there are these like really smooth moments here too. I was wondering if you could take a moment to kind of talk about how you framed this piece, and there's also moments where you interact with the sculpture and pick it up. I think that's coming up in a minute, so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah, great. So just going back to the concept of the different aspects of life, things are going to be smooth, things are going to be well planned out, things are going to be a little bumpy and rough, but then eventually at the end, like if you really want it bad enough, you're going to get to that end point. So just looking at the sculpture, like yes, it's very long and it has these like little bumps going up and like going up the leg of it, and then it finally gets to like a clearer picture. So at the beginning, at the bottom of it, if if you're not sure, like if you were to pan up, just like start with a pan up of the sculpture itself, not showing it in its entirety, you'd be like, well, what is that? And then if you get all the way up to the top, then you see what would look like a throne, a chair. Well, guess what? Like look at life. Think about it. You get to your goal, you get to your throne. You reached your target. Celebrate. All right, you got some scratches and bruises, or maybe things were just really like aligned for you and it went smoothly. Regardless of how you got there, you got there. So the movements are, yes, sometimes you feel like you're just going through the motions. You sometimes feel a little robotic. You feel like all you have sometimes is not even your own thoughts. All you have are these marching orders from your employer, your mother, your father. Maybe you're the younger one in the family. You're getting marching orders from your sister, your brother, whoever is responsible for shaping and molding the way you think. You have that person very much influencing your thoughts. And then at some point you got to grow up. All right. I hope that person grows up, and now you got to think for yourself. And, you thought life was this way and then it curved to the right. And then you're like, all right, it's right. No, 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 it goes left. Oh, so is it left? No, 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 it goes up. So what the heck is life? Life is everything. Life is everything. Take it. It is what it is. Take it. So then just finally grabbing it is, I made it. I got it here. I'm here. Now what? Well, then dance with it, celebrate it. You made it, celebrate. So that's my depiction with the movement.
Oh, very cool. Thank you so much for that, Savannah.
You're welcome.
And here we see Taylor lifting it up. All three of you lifted it at
Mm.
some point during the performance.
Yeah, and kind of got and we kind of like interrupted each other because again, like you may have someone interrupt you, or they could be helpful and like complete the picture. So it can go either or.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Savannah, so much for making the time. I know you got some time restraints for you today, which is why you're first.
I was thinking, like, dang, don't I end? Doesn't my piece end this thing? But I have until 8:15 because I definitely want to stick around and support my other brothers and sisters who work just as hard as myself, or maybe even more. So I want to stick on and cheer in silence.
Well, thank you again, Savannah, so much. And with that, we're going to scroll all the way back to the beginning, which is this piece. Let me just, okay, that's a lot. By Taylor. So Taylor, your piece was called The Teenager. And I'm really interested in hearing like kind of your initial thoughts and feelings about it and kind of what led you to your piece. So if you could just like take it from there.
Sure. Thank you, Neil. I think what originally kind of drew me to The Teenager as a sculpture, as a thing, was the bright colors. I think there's like a certain kind of antique sort of elegance about a lot of the sculptures, and The Teenager, along with like the performer maybe, is really like set apart from that to me. There's glitter, there's like bright pink, and it just, the whole thing looks like so much fun. And I like its kind of legs that it's standing on. I love flowers. So I was really interested in, it's kind of like smallness, but also all that it is made up of, made me really excited to start to work with it. And I think, it just has this overall air of just like whimsy and like, dreaminess, which is what a lot of this movement is conceptually inspired by. And then just the name of it, The Teenager, you think about being a teenager, and I think about like tension and hardness, but also like being in love and being like super daydreamy, really dramatic, which inspires a lot of this like pulled out and dramatic movement, this kind of like muffled scream. It's like, nobody understands me, nobody's listening to me. That kind of like, stereotypical teen. So the whole thing, I think choreographically just feels like a weird ebb and flow of like daydreaming through what you feel like life and love and like happiness should be. If that answers that initial question, Neil.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Shannon, I'm interested in hearing your response to that too, in thinking about this piece, The Teenager, and how you made it and the materials that you put into it. What kind of led you to even titling it The Teenager?
The Teenager has like a special place in my heart, and I think like Taylor's interpretation of it like couldn't have been more perfect. Like there, like something about being a teenager too, like it's daydreamy, like there's like ribbon and pearl, like you're dressed like the sculpture, and then you have your chucks on, and it kind of like, it just works so well because there's something awkward about the sculpture itself. And it's funny because this one's a lot different compared to the other sculptures because it was always the teenager before I started thinking of these sculptures as like characters that were personifying like certain like family members. And I mean, she kind of happened, she as in the sculpture, she happened when I was like transitioning from a painting practice into what I was calling an expanded painting practice. So like the legs are actually made out of stretcher bars. And I feel like just the construction of it, the materials, like there's something very unique about it, and it's totally representative of that, like my transition in my practice. And I feel like your performance just really mirrors it in a great way, especially like the mouth muffling and then like those glitchy moments where things are just kind of awkward. Like how, like you can't get more teenager-y than that, you know? So that one, it just like, it worked really well for me.
Specific question for Taylor. What led you to the decision of the flowers? You wanted to throw them out, and I thought it was so funny because we knew you would be first, and you're like, I'm gonna make a mess that I have to clean up.
Sounds about right. Actually, oddly enough, and this is not the way that I usually make. I usually start with like lots and lots of movement, and then I kind of pare down and put things where I feel like they should go. And this kind of like flower girl, like wedding weird thing was actually one of the first ideas I had about how to start crafting this piece. I was like, oh, I'll kind of like walk out. I knew that I wanted the sculpture kind of in front of where I was going to be, especially if this was going to be able to be filmed in like a specific way. So I was like, I can kind of walk up to it like it's an altar of sorts, and kind of, yeah, do this weird wedding march. Because it's melodramatic. It's like, I feel like it's really stereotypical that like every little girl dreams of their wedding, which is not untrue for myself. Like, I feel like growing up, I always was like, I'm gonna get married, I'm gonna have all these dogs, I'm gonna have all these kids, like, you know, and who knows, but that's, yeah, I think it was one of the first things that I was drawn to doing because of all of the drama that I felt like I could try and pull out of something. I was like, a wedding is the most dramatic thing I can think of, so let's go for it.
That's fair. I never even thought of like the whole flower girl association. I just because like I see flower girls as being so young.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess like no, I totally get that now. Well, thank you so much for talking, and we'll hear more from you later too. But it's a really great way to open up the piece in total. Just talking about the teenager, the youngest member of the family, is where we're starting with this, and there you go, cleaning them up. And on that note of cleaning up your mess, let's talk about the mess maker. Severity Stone, wonderful friend of Shannon's as well as a wonderful drag artist. I remember when we were talking about how we were going to come up with these different vignettes. I think this one was kind of called Dibs On by Severity. So Severity, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your costume, because I think that is like the first thing that was really striking about this piece is this costume of yours.
Oh, thank you. You noticed I was wearing a costume. Yeah, that's actually not a costume. Those are my pajamas. I had just rolled out of bed actually at that point. No, I was obviously, I love all of Shannon's work, and I was very, if you know anything about like my aesthetic and the kind of things that I'm into, I was drawn to the mess maker because it was like particularly dark and kind of gave kind of like a haunted dollhouse vibe, and I kind of liked the way that the like gnarled up shards of like wood were placed, and it was really cool to me. Like I said, I liked all of her pieces, but I was like, nope, that one, that's mine. And what I did is I kind of incorporated the idea of the house, and I made this rather elaborate headpiece thing, which is all like a functioning house. There's like little rooms and light fixtures inside, and I kind of became that. Someone said I looked like the Baba Yaga. I don't know if you're familiar with like the folklore character. Very much that, unintentionally, but very much that. And I just wanted to, yeah, like embody like the rage and the kind of angst, not just with the piece, but with the song, the whole song, Violet, as well. But yeah, that's what I did. I'm just an angry drunk teenager whose parents don't understand them. I got my bottle of wine, and it's not just a phase, Mom. This is who I am.
I really enjoy working with you. You're so much fun.
Thank you.
But I also remember day of, you brought that thing, and originally it was a headpiece, but then you were like, I think I want to put it over my head. And you have this beautiful moment where you're knocking on your own door.
Yeah, so it originally wasn't supposed to be over my entire head. I designed it to be kind of a hat, but I made it like just a little bit too big. And it was already cumbersome enough. It just kind of like teetered on top of my head. So I was like, what if I just like yank it down? It was kind of a little bit of a pain to like get on and off because of my ears. But yeah, it was like a gamble because I was like, well, you're not really gonna see as much of my face if I pull it all the way down, but I think it looks better, and it like tells, it tells a story. And I did like the little door and this kind of like peekaboo reveal thing.
Well, and those moments where you see your eyes with those bright green contacts are just so arresting.
Yeah,
Like,
thank you.
So Shannon, you wrote a little bit about this piece and how the messmaker is that figure in the family who could be like the lovable drunk or the mean drunk, depending on the day. And so I'm curious to kind of hear about your reaction to seeing, especially the filmed version where she had the wine bottle the whole time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, the wine bottle, like, it's ridiculous. Like, to scale to severity, looks like it could be like a beer. Like, look.
It was actually full of beer because I had drank all the wine.
Right. So it tracks. It makes sense. But the messmaker, yeah, like when we started thinking about this whole project, I think it started with drag queens in my brain, and I was like, I need severity. But that was before I even made the messmaker. But after I made the messmaker, I was like, oh my God, I know which drag queen this is for. Like, there's no denying that. But the process of making the messmaker was interesting too, because it was one of those where I had the idea before I made the actual sculpture. So typically I just kind of respond to the materials, and they kind of are born into their like personas. But yeah, the messmaker is like that person in your family that kind of comes in like a whirlwind, creates all the drama. And I was thinking of like maybe like it could be a lovable drunk or the mean drunk. It depends if they took their meds or not. But I feel like a lot of people can relate to having that family member to different extremes. And I think the band Hole, like that 90s grunge, like Courtney Love, just kind of like embodied that feeling for me too. And also the way that Lane edited this and filmed it, I'm like the like shots from like here with the wallpaper to her dancing around, it just like works and kind of gives me that like grungy like 90s music video vibe. Just super fun.
For real. Yeah, the film work and everything was really spectacular. I wasn't even expecting to be filmed like so well that day.
Yeah.
With the backdrop and everything, but it really it came together really, really cool for everybody.
It was in the emails.
I know, but it's like I didn't like know exactly what was gonna happen, and I was like, oh, you're gonna be like going around 360 with the camera and all this stuff. So yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah, everyone involved like really went in really hard. A cool thing about the costuming too, and this goes for Coleslaw too when we get there, I actually had sent all of like a lot of these materials to the drag queens so that we could get like some of the colors right, and just like see, like there was like a big reveal on the day of to see how they all came out. So
yeah, the green, she had given me that that dress that I'm actually wearing, which I wanted to do more with, but I had kind of run out of time spending all that time on building a haunted house. But the green paint, which is a little hard to see all over the front of it, is the same paint that was used in the sculpture.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Severity, so much for being a part of this project, as well as taking the time to join us tonight.
Of course.
And we are moving forward in the piece with the Caretaker, a very different character from that of the teenager and that of the messmaker. We have this very, we see Jasmine again, Savannah again. Jasmine's later. So let's start by talking about the choreography of this piece. This was Jill, right? Jill, you choreographed this piece, or am I mistaken?
It me.
Oh, yay!
Yeah. So we actually had, Shannon had mentioned before too, there were like a couple different names for a couple of the sculptures. So I had The Giver as the like first name that I had for that sculpture. And I knew, so like the things that I knew were the name The Giver, and I think we talked about the Caretaker, and I had seen the sculpture, and I knew that we were talking about like family stuff, family dynamics and stuff like that. So of course I was thinking of like a mother type figure. And in this piece, I thought a lot about the mother type figure in the family isn't necessarily always like the mother. So that type role gets taken on by lots of different people in a family, and mother's mother in different ways. So I kind of took that, and I took these two lovely ladies in a lot of the choreography as mirroring each other. So they were doing similar things, almost as if they were like looking at their reflection, and their underlying meaning is to be the caretaker, but of course they're doing it in different ways. So that was mostly the underlying choreographic process for all of this. And of course, the sculpture itself, I wanted to use as like a main part of it. So you can see in the beginning that they're, on opposite sides of it, and using it in the choreography as well.
Yeah, they circle it too at a few different points. And I think it's interesting how you kind of tried to create the costumes, the paint, mimicking the paint on the object. I'm interested in kind of hearing about the process of choreographing this piece without being in it, and what that was like.
Yeah, totally. So there were obviously moves in it that I felt were mimicked mothering or giving or caretaker or that type of thing. I worked a lot with reflection and mirroring, but I also took a couple moments with the dancers to like talk about what that meant, and talk about like we talked about different types of mothering. We talked about that this sculpture is a baby cradle, and we talked about maybe in some moments making our bodies into the baby cradle or into the baby like mobile thing that turns above the cradle or something in that moment that's happening right now. Things that are similar to that. That was interesting to discuss with the dancers. So I definitely took their input on it too. What I really liked about like being able to step out of it, being the choreographer and not being a dancer in it, was the reflection moments. And so I could see, like, I can be an outside uh, perspective of two people seeing, or maybe one person seeing their reflection, or two people seeing each other, like, and finding some sort of commonality. And it's definitely a way different perspective than being in it. So I think that's mostly why I did that as well, to be able to step out and see them mirror each other and see them reflect each other in those moments.
Absolutely, yeah. And Shannon, so much of your work, the sculptures, they are these found furniture pieces that you thrift or find or what have you. And I'm interested in kind of hearing the story behind like finding this cradle and deciding to turn it into this piece, especially since it's kind of inverted in a way where like it can no longer function as a cradle. Some of these can still function as chairs, but this cannot function as a cradle. So what was your process in making the piece itself?
Well, I mean, the whole like, I just wanted to make something kind of creepy. Like that's kind of like how I like came into making this guy. Like I was like, what if it was like a cradle that's eating little tiny baby cradles? It was also a way for me to practice like fabricating objects on my own versus like how I normally thrift them. So like, and kind of playing with the object, like the domesticated objects, like objects from the home, but in a different way. So like the baby cradles that are in the big cradles, like mouth, if you will, are made out of like insulation foam that you would like use to insulate your house. And I think like this one totally is one of like an example of it just kind of happened upon its persona. Like it had to be the caregiver, it had to be that maternal character because of the baby imagery and also like the pastels. And then there's something about like the heaviness, like the top heaviness of it that kind of makes me think of like maybe what a mother's body like goes through like when they're pregnant, giving birth, and then everything that happens later on. It's like, so like that's why I was kind of playing with the name The Giver as well. Like a mother is constantly giving, like her body, like she's, nourishing. Yeah, and I definitely think there's something ritualistic about this, the way that this performance is choreographed that I really enjoyed. That kind of made sense to like those types of things that are definitely passed down through the maternal line. And like I think that you totally like, it's interesting to see how you were able to pick up on that just based on like the title and the way it looks. So
Yeah,
I
like when
really
you
enjoy
become a mother, then these like things just happen, and you're just like, okay, here's everything.
Yeah, and your body like gets destroyed and like you're constantly, I mean like I'm pregnant right now, so like I'm like experiencing it too, so it's like kind of interesting just through personal experience, like, and I've only like kind of scratched like just the tip of it. So
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for that. I'm happy Shannon, that you offered that little asterisk of you being pregnant while saying these things, because I think it's interesting that you made this well before you were pregnant, but then like now you're like, oh, I was right. um, in the interest of time, I want to just make sure we keep moving forward, so that we're not here all night, even though this is an amazing conversation. So the next piece in the lineup is The Survivor, which is a duet featuring Jasmine and Taylor in these amazing costumes. Jasmine, what up?
Hey, Neil. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay, awesome.
So this was actually the first piece that I saw, and it was well before the costumes. It was well before any of it. I happened over to the Dance Collective over the summer, and you and Taylor were working on it.
Mhm.
And I think, it was my introduction to this entire like process of how y'all were doing these choreographed moves. And I am incredibly interested in hearing how you came up with the references that you make, because we talked a little bit about clowning that day. We talked a little bit about like mime and pantomime. So I'd be interested in hearing like, how did you do this?
Yeah. I feel like we came at this piece from a couple different directions. And one direction that you mentioned was the clowning, this idea of clowning. And I was just thinking, like, how on earth did I get to clowns with this piece? But I think it really started with the title of the piece and just sitting in reflection of this idea of surviving something. and like a common coping mechanism that can come out of this like desperate need to survive something is humor. And yeah, just kind of like the happy face masking the pain, which I think led me on to like the sad clown archetype. This idea of like, how can we just make the funny so much more extreme in order to kind of like, I don't know, cover up what's going down underneath that. And so from there, we started playing with expression and like moments where like we would really try to emphasize how happy we were, but then it would like crack and we would get like the pain underneath would show through. So that was like one whole half of how we were kind of approaching the way that we were performing the movement, the kind of like expressive qualities that we were bringing to the piece. The other half of this whole thing, I think was just my fascination with the aesthetic of the chair itself. You can kind of see it in the background there. It looks very chair-like, but then the top half of it is just like tilted. As if you take this like long line and just like snap it right in the middle. And I remember from the very first moment I saw that sculpture, I was just like, I loved this idea of like taking a line and breaking it. It's kind of a common sort of idea that's approached in a lot of modern dance repertory and technique of like taking the line of the body and bending it in certain ways, or just like breaking the line. For example, if you were to take a straight arm, you would break the line by bending it or something of that nature. So you start to see a lot of kind of crookedness in the way that we're moving our bodies. So we actually mirrored the chair at one point where we are standing up really nice and tall, and then we just like break the line at our torsos and lean sideways. And then there's a lot of other kind of like breaking around. And I think that's where this sort of like combining that with the expressions really brought in this whole mime aesthetic and just tied it all off together.
It's wild. Shannon, just really quickly, I'm interested in hearing how like this piece that is very much so about trauma, very much so about surviving, it ended up being kind of the most whimsical of the performance. And I'm wondering like about your reactions to that and how you resonate with this idea of like performing as a form of coping.
I mean, it was really, this is why like this whole experience was so awesome, is like I wouldn't have interpreted that piece in this way, and like now I will forever like look at the survivor like at like in a different kind of almost more lighthearted way, even though I understand that it's actually kind of, I mean, the coping mechanism of wearing this facade, it's kind of a dark thing. But I think what I love the most about this performance is just aesthetically how the costuming came out. And like the survivor is kind of about how like your body like keeps score of trauma over time, and like there's tumors, and like it's an interesting juxtaposition to have these like light, happy, like clowny colors making up these like tumored onesie costumes. It's great. And yeah, I think it just like added another dimension or layer to who the survivor is for me.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for that. And again, in the interest of time, just kind of moving forward, the next piece in this lineup is called The Controller, and unfortunately, Joey, the performer and choreographer, could not join us tonight. But Jill, you were in this piece, and actually, let me fast forward, make sure I have the right people. Yes, Jane as well. I was just wondering if you take 2 seconds real quick to talk about this piece and how you made these decisions.
I think Jill's talking but is muted.
So that's your cue to jump in.
Okay. Well, So I think Cammie's main vision of this was that Joey was the controller of some sorts, and I'm not sure in what way he was yeah, there's my face right there. But during the piece, Jill and I are kind of like his controlees in some sort of way. He manipulates us with his choreography. Even when he's not touching us, we're kind of manipulated by this other force, which is Joey. Yeah, is that kind of what you were gonna say, Jill?
Exactly what she said.
Good talk, guys. So Cammie choreographed this piece. Joey choreographed a later piece. Okay, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, there's definitely like these moments of you two being in control, and him totally manipulating you. You're mimicking each other while he kind of does his own thing. And Shannon, when you talked about this piece, you talk about it as like this very domineering presence, and like the Victorian design kind of referencing opulence and status. And so I'm interested in kind of hearing, you have this final line in your description that you sent me. He's kind of the dad, but not the good kind. So I'm interested in hearing how you reacted to this piece with that in mind.
Yeah, I mean, again, like it's just, yeah, it's really interesting to see how these characters who have taken such a like certain particular like persona in my mind, how they've changed based on these performances. And I think it totally works. There's something like very sexy about this performance too, like, so, and it kind of works with that like domineering aspect of the controller's character. I also like in like relation to all the other dances, I think the soundtrack for this one, it was like an interesting like energy shift. So it's like kind of got like here it kind of like brings your energy back up in a really interesting way. And kind of like demands your attention the way that the controller does when you like walk into a room. But yeah, really fun piece.
Oh, there's your face again, Jane. Awesome. Well, thank you for speaking on that, all of you. The next piece in the lineup is The Lost Child, which is this beautiful little solo by Taylor up against the wall. And this piece is also in the gallery itself, mounted on the wall. And this was an interesting kind of problem solving we had to do, where we had all these pieces in the room that worked really nicely, but then we had to figure out how are we going to do this. And then we're like, well, let's just put it on the wall. Who cares? And a lot of the choreography is very wall based. So Taylor, you're still with us. And did you choreograph this piece, Taylor, or did you perform someone's choreography?
I did not. This is Jane's choreography.
Ah, right. So in that case, Jane, would you like to speak on some of the decisions you made in this piece, and what led you to kind of creating these movements in this very wall-based piece?
Yes, I was so excited to do this piece with Taylor. I think I originally chose the sculpture just because it was so different. It was the only one that was like against a wall and it was upside down. I really liked, it kind of looked like a beautiful like hot mess. Like it had all these pieces of fabric attached and all this, I think there was like gold sparkles everywhere and just splotches of different colored paint. And it just reminded me of like the family member that's kind of like the reclusive wallflower, kind of like the black sheep of like some sort. They're not really, like, it reminded me of like someone that doesn't want to be understood and like isn't trying to be understood. They're just like against the wall and they're like, whatever. And I had this idea to have Taylor against the wall, and the whole beginning of the piece is her kind of, figuring out noticing her existence, and maybe there's a sprinkle of her questioning her existence or questioning her reality and like her life. And I thought Taylor would be perfect for this because she has those beautiful long limbs that I wish I had. And I wanted the movement to be pretty like reckless and unapologetic and like flailing, but still controlled, and have that like, you know, super all over the place. And then you see her come back to her center, and like she's able to like pull herself back in. And she, as you can see, she depicts that so well. Look at that leg. And then I was just like at the lake one day, and I heard someone playing on their speaker that Donna Summer song, I Feel Love. And I was like, what is this song? Jill's like, yeah, I was there with you. I was like, what's this song? And it like had this like, just like beat, almost like you're at like a club. And it was a different version. Like it gets all like, I don't know, like extraterrestrial in there. I don't know if that's the right word, but I was like, this is the song. And then, you know, the whole process was a lot of just like playing around with that too. Like, what does it mean to lose yourself and then like come back into yourself? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that soundtrack, that choice in sound is so disorienting to me every time I hear it, especially towards the end where like the beat and the bass almost make sense, but they don't, but then they do again. And I remember during the editing process of this film, I kept listening to it through headphones, and like I was almost getting nauseous. But like that kind of happens in Taylor's movements too, and like the way that it's like a party girl who's just trying to find her place in life. And I think that very much so meshes with Shannon's idea of the lost child, the child who goes out into the world and is trying to find themselves. Shannon, I'm just like, do you have anything to add to that? I think like, you know, I think that Jane really like captured the essence of this piece. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I totally agree. The only thing I have to add is that like Lane just did an incredible job filming this piece. Like there's like in relation to like the whole like other performances, it's nice to see like this close up, more intimate, like different lighting. There's like lots of textures, and like you get to see like the textures of the sculpture and like Taylor's hair. I think later on Lane actually texted me and was like, I really enjoyed filming that Donna Summers human. Like I could do that more. It was great. Yeah.
Donna Summers.
Like look at the hair. Yeah, it's just gorgeously filmed.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, thank you, Jane, for sharing that thought process. So again, moving right along, we have our next piece, which is The Visionary. And this piece was choreographed by Joey, if I remember correctly. And features
this time.
What?
I'll unmute myself this time.
Yeah, so Jill, could you talk about this piece?
Yes, can you remind me of the name of it?
This is The Visionary.
Okay, because we had a couple names for it also. Yeah, I think, you know, Joey went in a couple directions with it, but wanted to go, or wait, Shannon, can you remind me of the original or the other name that there was for it?
I don't remember, but I feel like we were calling her like the crazy, sexy, cool aunt.
Yes, but okay, at a certain point, was it called the Wise One?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, so I think like Joey's original intention with the like, you know, the original Wise One name and then the Visionary was like thinking about, you know, being wise in multiple different ways. And, you know, the Wise One, I would definitely interpret in a different way. But Joey kind of interpreted it, I think, as himself in his own family dynamic, which was really interesting to like, you know, he like came out of that. So Yeah, the soundtrack too, I think, was a lot of the inspiration for the choreography. It's funny to watch it right now without sound. Because it's some like crazy house music, like woo situation. And it definitely is like sexy ant vibes. Um,
The drop in the chorus, it lives in my head rent free. Like
yeah, right.
I will just be like cooking dinner and just be like bam ba na 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 na, like I yeah, and this is also a good example of Shannon kind of just telling the dancers, like most of the pieces you can interact with physically, because at the end, Joey sits on it like a throne, um, and Shannon gave that permission, like, no, you can be kind of rough with them. And this one in particular, she was like, yes, you can sit on it. It is still a functioning chair. It's the only functioning chair in the entire space.
I think that definitely played a lot into the choreography as well, having that sort of like throne vibe to it. So,
Absolutely, yeah. Awesome. Shannon, any other thoughts on this piece, like other than the crazy, sexy, cool aunt?
No, it was so good, so fun.
Absolutely,
I
yeah.
love the lipstick bits there.
Oh yeah, and I remember in one of the rehearsals, one of the lipsticks like dropped, and they were just like, "I guess we'll just pretend I don't." Ton of fun.
it was
Thank.
definitely a crazy one. It brought me back.
Lots of flips, lots of really interesting movements. And speaking of club hits, speaking of all that fun stuff, we get to move on to the next piece, which is The Performer, as choreographed and performed by our very own Coleslaw. Ooh, there she is. So Coleslaw, hi. I want to talk to you about why Sia, why Chandelier. What about this piece kind of brought you there?
Well, the first thing that I saw about this sculpture was the wallpaper that was an accessory to it. And the wallpaper looks pretty normal, but if you look up close, it's actually someone hanging themselves on a dinner table, and there's like spilled drinks all over the table. So we went with like the theme of excess and what do you call it?
Opulence.
Yeah, like overkill, and based on the image, I felt like the song made sense. Shannon agreed. We came to an agreement. The theme of the song, is drinking too much.
And Shannon had provided you with like a fabric version of that wallpaper, which is what you're wearing as a skirt.
Yeah, so the top part of the skirt is fabric, exactly. I think it was like 3 yards of the print on white fabric. Everything that I'm wearing, it was given to me in a package. It was all like little scraps of fabric, and I came up with that. And the skirt underneath is a torn up wedding dress because I felt like it's a gown, it's torn, she's a mess basically, and she's doing her best. So I wanted to give lots of energy, chaotic energy, like a whirlwind came through the studio and was touching everything and whipping chairs around.
Well, and the first cut of this that Lane put together was a single cut. Like they didn't want to touch it at all, because you were just so amazing.
I mean, it's pretty much a single cut. I was anticipating seeing this for months. I was so excited. It's so amazing. I'm very grateful to have this. So thank you for including me, everyone.
Of course. Oh my God. Shannon, I want to talk to you about this notion of like the life is a constant performance, and how, you know, Coleslaw like chose such a sad song about like drinking and being alone and depressed, and then very clearly had a very humorous take to it, especially these moments where you're interacting with the other family members is so good. So it seems like that hit the nail on the head kind of with the idea of that piece.
Totally. I mean, it's the song Chandelier too is great because if you've ever seen like the music video for it, it's like crazy. I don't know like dance like speak or anything, but it seems like very like modern contemporary dancing like at its best, like super highbrow. So it's kind of like I kind of liked this collapsing of like highbrow and lowbrow with like the drag performers, and it just kind of like comes together so nicely in Coleslaw's piece. Like I can't stop like watching and rewatching and rewatching and rewatching this. Like
Imagine if there was spotlights.
I know. And
It's amazing what a little dramatic lighting will do. I'll tell you what.
right? Like I just feel like Coleslaw and Lane need to work together like more.
Let's make it
I'd love
happen.
to. Unfortunately, I don't have access to any dance studios like you lovely dance crew. So take advantage of that, and don't take it for granted. I call it my studio boudoir. That's where I do all of my digital drag videos, and it's literally my tiny bedroom with with a green screen. So we do what we have, what we can with what we have.
Yep, totally.
Tangent.
Well, you did amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for joining us tonight again. Really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Coleslaw.
I love you so much, Shannon, and I'm so happy for this new chapter in your life with the baby.
Yeah. It's cool.
Well, speaking of babies, it's not a very good segue into this next piece. But the next piece is the volatile one, which I think was also known as the Chain Smokin' Mama at one point. Is
I
that
was
this
not
piece?
aware of that. But I love it.
Nana.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chain Smokin' Nana.
Even better. Yeah.
So Jasmine, talk about it.
Yeah, okay. So it feels kind of impossible to talk about this piece without mentioning that there is a significant element of it that ended up missing from the final production.
To be fair, there's still time. He can always send me an MP3.
Oh, I will get on him about that because I'd love to add it back in.
I told Stuart.
I know. He's finishing up his semester at grad school, and that's a hell of a time. So but the element that's missing for those of you who watched through this is my partner Stuart, both in life and in art. He is reading a poem, and the way in which I choreographed this piece was algorithmic. I'm really interested in exploring ways of making choreography where I make zero decisions. So what I actually did, the title of the piece is called, or the poem is called Mr. Bernard Shaw. And I created a movement or a motion that I attributed to each letter in that title. So for example, one of the motions you'll see in the piece that's attributed to the letter A in the word Bernard is where I take my hands and I just like grab my head. And so for each letter, there is a different motion. And then as my partner Stuart was reading through the poem, anytime a word started with a letter from that title, I would do the motion that was attributed to that letter. It's a little convoluted to explain, but basically it's an algorithm. It's a mathematical sort of framework, predetermined entirely. I'm just improvising in response to the poetry. So it is actually really fascinating to watch it now without the poem and just hear it alone with the music, but maybe it's now just become sort of like a physical poem. It's been transcribed into the human body.
That's so interesting because I had no idea that that was the process. I just knew that one day you brought Stuart over and were like, hey, he's going to be reading into a microphone. Is that cool? And I was like, yeah.
There was, both of us were actually just a little bit fascinated in keeping that a secret and seeing if it would read, like, or if it could be kind of masked enough that the connection would be a little vague. And I think both of us are really interested in kind of like the uncertain with our art making processes. So it didn't matter to us so much if people knew or didn't know. If people figured it out, it would have been interesting. If they didn't, it's also interesting.
I think it's interesting regardless. It's also interesting, this idea of like a hidden, a somewhat hidden message kind of going up, because it's almost like you created a language that only you understand. And in thinking about the volatile one and thinking about what Shannon is kind of bringing into it, this unpredictability that and this illegibility that you kind of like have your own language, but not everybody around you understands necessarily. So then like you hit the ground or like you do something that we're like, whoa, what is that? But it makes sense to you.
Yeah, I feel like I should mention too, I did not have that poem memorized. There's like over 300 words in that poem. And they're arranged in columns, and Stuart would just kind of like pick a column to read from. So even I had no idea what was coming. So all of my decision making that you're seeing in the piece is like being made in real time. So it kind of created this really charged space where I'm like performing, but I'm also just like really like listening the whole time. I'm like, what was that letter again? What was that word? Because I have to like hear it in real time in order to know what movement comes after the one preceding it. So yeah, in that sense, the experience of performing the piece was somewhat volatile too.
That's wild. I love that. Shannon, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
I had no idea about the process. For me, I mean, I thought that this performance in particular, like really embodied the like abject quality of the sculptures in a way that none of the other performances did. And it's totally like all the tearing of the fabric, and like you just look like you were born out of that sculpture. And I just aesthetically, it's like chef's kiss. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for enlightening us on the fun surprises that we learn every day. So the next piece is The Ghost, which is this beautiful duet. Oh, nope. No. Oh my goodness. Sorry. It's The Ghost, which is this beautiful duet with Jill and Joey. Remind me, Jill, who choreographed this piece again? Jane.
Again.
Yeah, Jane, talk about The Ghost.
Yeah. So first of all, the chair does not like feel how it looks. I picked the chair because it looks like there's lace draped over it. And when I saw the picture, I was like, oh, it's like lace on a chair, but it's actually solid without a chair underneath, which is super cool. And it kind of reminded me of like an old Victorian era style thing that was equally creepy, but also really beautiful and elegant, which is just like super cool because I think there could be a harmony within those characteristics. Like things can be beautiful and elegant, but also like have that withered, wilting, draped essence. So I really wanted to play with the dancers' like natural dynamic and kind of within the choreography show what it's kind of like playing with their natural dynamic and then their not natural dynamic. Joey and Jill are both super strong and like grounded dancers, and through the choreography I wanted to play with showing them off in that way, but also kind of be able to break off and have that flowy, really light essence that the chair kind of gives. And I like love Chopin. It's my favorite. He is my favorite composer. I like listen to him all the time, especially when I'm stuck in traffic and I need to calm down. I'll throw on Chopin music. So I've always wanted to choreograph to a song composed by him. And I think this song kind of goes with the whole idea of harmony with two different qualities. Like there are some points of the song that are super intense and loud and you just like feel them, and then the other parts are so beautiful and light and airy. So I kind of just wanted to mimic that with the choreography.
Yeah, and this piece in particular, this sculpture is interesting because it's the only sculpture that isn't necessarily a chair, but it's actually an absence of a chair. So Shannon, can you talk about like creating this piece and how it exists within the rest of this family?
Yeah, the ghost is, I think it's like one of the latest pieces that I've made, the most recent, and it's something that I really want to explore more. Like after I made it, I was like, I feel like a real sculptress now, because it wasn't so much of like taking all these objects that I typically like thrift and like stick together like haphazardly. Like somehow there was like a much more calculated approach to like making this piece. So it's a piece of lace. So I'm still like talking about like the domesticated space, like the home. So it's a huge lace curtain that I just dipped in cement that I like draped over a chair and let cure and then paint. And it kind of like made me think of Janine Antoni's piece where she like puts the rawhide on her back and lets it cure. So like kind of like talking about the body again. But yeah, there's something really ethereal about that piece in general, because it is just like this floating like ghost of a chair. And I think the choreography and like the music like really reflected that for sure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And so, again, in the interest of time, I have about 3 more things I want to make sure we talk about tonight. But thank you, Jane, for talking about. I'm happy you finally got the opportunity to choreograph to Chopin too.
Thank you.
Of course. So this next piece that we're talking about is The Sage, which was choreographed by Taylor, I believe, if I remember correctly. Am I remembering?
That is true.
Cool.
It's
So
true.
Taylor, talk about this piece. And this is such a quiet piece too, in comparison to everything else.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because that was very much what I was going for. I took another approach that I don't typically take in making, and I decided that I really wanted Cami to tell a story. And that's, outside of my like competition lyrical choreography that I put on like 12-year-olds, I don't typically go for like a beginning, middle, end sort of story approach to choreographing. But this sculpture, I think on the in the initial notes that we were given, this was called the Introspect, which really attracted me to it. In addition to the color and the kind of like, openness, the negative space of it, the tattered cushion, all of it was like, very much an aesthetic that I was interested in. And I really wanted Cami to be like kind of waking up from a nightmare, or like being awoken in the middle of the night by some unseen sort of presence, which ended up being really almost too perfect that the ghost was the sculpture that came right before it, because a lot of Cammie's direction, and I feel like it's important to note that this piece was really an improvisational score. So all of the movement is Cammie's in real time. But I gave her a very specific sort of to-do list, if you will, like of kind of like marks to make, things to do. So yeah, as you can see right now, she's kind of looking around like I told her to be looking around as if something had just touched her on the shoulder or called her name. And the music also that I chose is very haunting, very like mysterious, but not super dramatic. It's quite plateaued, I guess, at one sort of tension level. And so I feel like a lot about this piece is inspired by this open space in the chair. This was like a really specific moment that that camera-wise I really wanted, because I was thinking of this kind of open chair back as like either a mirror, an eye, a portal. Like what do these kind of open spaces like resonate as for us, like in terms of like metaphor and all that poetic stuff. So yeah, I had a lot of fun working with Cammie on this. I think the movement that she brought to the concepts that I asked for really hit the nail on the head. She's kind of, once she gets behind the mirror, portal, eye, whatever it is, she goes from these like very quiet sort of ghostly movements to like more hard-hitting, more musical. I feel like I wanted her to go between like trying to disappear or trying to move without being heard or seen, to like doing these sort of like outbursts, inviting being seen. So it was, a lot of moving between those two things. It was a really fun piece to work on for sure.
Very cool. Yeah. Shannon, I'm interested in hearing about your name change, and how you went from the introspect to the sage.
Right. I like forgot that I had called it the introspect. I was thinking of like somebody who like looks inward, someone who's like really meditative. And then the original, actually, this sculpture is the one that was originally titled The Chain Smoking Nana, because of all those like holes. Like I was thinking of like cigarette holes in like my Nana like just chain smokes in her chair all day. Like it was kind of inspired after my own Nana. So then because of the Nana thing, I was thinking of like someone who's old and wise. So that's why she became the sage. And I think like the mirror and everything that Taylor was saying about like the eye and all those metaphors is kind of like what was driving that title. And fun fact, the frame was a mirror that I punched out.
No way.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Serendipity.
Right?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Taylor, for speaking on this piece. It's really, really fascinating to hear that it was a score-based piece.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting approaches to movement in this entire piece, from like very traditional choreography to more algorithmic to more improvisational. So it's really cool to kind of like hear how all these ideas came about. So the last sculpture that we're talking about tonight is the final one that Jill was involved in, The Guardian. Jill, first of all, I love this moment right here, where you're really emulating the gesture of the piece. But I'm interested in hearing the formulation of this piece, and The Guardian is very much so mother and child, and how this came to be.
Totally. Well, so the format of what is happening right on the screen right now, a lot of the reason I chose this sculpture was because of the shape of it. Because I feel like it's so bent over, and so, you know, I almost like I thought I wrote down something like, you know, you're bending over backwards, and I feel like the guardian or the mother type figure is always bending over backwards for whoever they're taking care of. And so that was pretty interesting to me, and I definitely want I think I mimicked that in a couple moments, with different dynamics in this. Um, and another thing in it was the little baby sculpture, which was really fun to play with during, throughout the choreography. But also super different than the other motherly type piece that I also choreographed, which is hilarious that I chose both of the motherly type.
I literally just realized that too.
Very hilarious, but so different. This one I thought of as more like, well, it's called the Guardian, and so I almost think of the Guardian as like someone who like watches over from afar, not necessarily like the caretaker, the giver, that's like the person who's there every single day, like, you know, making breakfast and packing lunch and doing all of those things. And the guardian, I thought of almost as like the overseer. Um, and so, you know, a couple other like inspiration things for it. For whatever reason, I thought that the sculpture looked like it was herding cats, like it was like trying to get in. You know, like the baby is not attached. The baby is not there. So it's like the sculpture is like bending over and like trying to get it, trying to like make sure all of like, you know, trying to make sure whoever it's watching over is okay. um I think, Shannon, another name for it that we had at one point was the Wounded Healer, which is why I chose the song that I chose, which is the Beatles' I Want You. And I choreograph to music a lot. And so, you know, like music has a heavy influence on my choreography. So, um, from that song was was a lot of the other movements like head banging and like, you know, the guardian and the healer is trying to take care of everyone else but maybe like wounded herself. So yeah, I think that was the gist of it.
You know, I think this is also a really great piece. It actually offers a segue into the last thing that I wanted to talk about. So somebody's face that you've seen maybe throughout the night as I've been fast forwarding and things is Krystle Brown, who performed a series of readings in between each piece. And the piece, the reading for this piece was actually taken from the movie Hereditary. Um, and so I'm actually going to stop sharing right now so that way we can just look at Krystle. So here's everybody. So Krystle, you know, we had these readings in between each piece. Early on in the process, we were trying to figure out how are we going to transition all of these pieces? How are we going to make this work? And eventually we decided, at some point, I think I was like, hey, how about we pull a Beyonce Lemonade and have like these spoken word bits in between? And Shannon was like, I know the perfect person for this. And it happened to be you. So I'm interested in kind of hearing about that process of choosing and curating the readings for each piece, and kind of like where you took these things from.
I mean, it was really just like a collaborative between Shannon and I, and then obviously a collaborative in a way between us two and the sources that we pulled from. So Shannon provided some of the poetry or sources. I think Shannon, you even pulled from Hereditary for that piece.
I did particularly, and I was so funny that you segued into talking about the readings right now, Neil, because I was like, oh, this is a great time to talk about that, because in particular with that piece, I thought, like there was some sort of discord, especially because I changed the name of the character, and it was like this mother and child, and then like we were listening to "I Want You" by the Beatles. So then I thought like this reading that we could pull from the script from Hereditary by Ari Aster would be really great, because it's Toni Collette's character talking to her son, being like, I tried to have a miscarriage. So like, and then the piece was about a mother and a child, and then the song "I Want You," it kind of just like, it all came together in like a kind of messed up, dark way that like really worked, and it really tied in. Like Jill's head banging, there was something kind of heavy about it, and it just like that was like an example of where like the reading was like, yeah, it like really worked.
Yeah, and for my own work, I've done a lot of performance where I embody or try to embody like my mother, or like memories of my own Nana or my grandmother. Shannon and I over the years have bonded over our like mutual traumas and things like that with our own families. We have a lot of crossover with our work. So when I thought about like the poems and the songs and the readings that I pulled from to put into her work for the show, I thought about my own work, and I thought about Shannon's work, and like my emotional and conceptual like pull with each piece, and like what I was getting from it as like both a whole and as like individual piece. And so I try to get from like a variety of sources, and that's why there's like things like songs again, because I think songs are poetry. And I even got like, I brought the book, but I've been reading this book. It's called Ruins. It's actually a collection of writings, and it's by the Whitechapel Gallery, but I got it. It's like a MIT. So I think there's a lot of crossover with Shannon's work with like the concepts of ruins, and definitely my own work too. So pulling different parts of that and like reading it in a more poetic way. These more like academic writings. That was really interesting. So yeah, it was more of like a collaborative between her and I would say.
Yeah, and there was even a moment where we invited you to one of the first main rehearsals, and like they were doing their thing, and you were just kind of like tekka, like figuring out like different things and being like, oh, this would work perfect for here. And eventually, like I think one of the most successful part about the reading is exactly how you formatted the very academic readings into more poetic versions, like straight up like the not only these essays from this book, but then also there are readings from like the Yellow Wallpaper, song lyrics, etc. And like they're all kind of especially the non-poetic sources are edited in such a way that they're a bit more readable and a bit more digestible.
Yeah, I even included like Bachelard. That's a writer that I really find like resonant with my own work and with Shannon's work, talking about like specifically the writing, the poetics of space, talking about the home, but like the psychological elements of home, within like talking about like the architecture. So yeah, I just wanted to make it like more, I think digestible is like a good word to it, but like a little bit more emotional, like putting emotions into the work. But I know like when I was reading it, I wasn't like reading it overly dramatic. I was keeping it like pretty even keeled. So it was like kind of like a push and a pull. It was a difficult thing to like perform, especially like filming it. Because that's something I haven't really done. Like I've performed in my own work, but not like spoken like that before. So it was like that was like a challenging thing, but it was pretty fun to do.
Well, I think you did great.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I mean,
And
I love working with Lane too, so.
yeah, and that's actually a wonderful moment to kind of end this on. So you and Lane and Shannon all went to grad school together. And I remember day of, Lane comes in, you come in, Shannon comes in, and we were like, this is the family reunion.
Mhm.
Like this is the family that we're bringing back together in this like weird project that took us 8 months to figure out how to do in COVID. And it was just like a wonderful, stressful, terrible, amazing experience. And I think that's a great note to end it on. I'm just gonna go back to a gallery view real quick, so we can see Savannah's ceiling and Coleslaw's green screen. Oh no, okay. Hi, welcome back. So everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to be here tonight. I know this was a bit of a long event, but it was a wonderful conversation, honestly. I really appreciate all of you taking the time to hang out with us, and to talk with each other. And if you haven't watched it yet, please go on our Vimeo, the Real Art Ways Vimeo. We have the link everywhere. It's on our website. It's on our Facebook. I think it's on our Instagram too. And watch Family Reunion. It's about an hour. It's actually shorter than this chat was. And it's very much so a labor of love. And it's something that speaking for myself, it was wonderful. It was a wonderful experience, and it was really nice to finally see it come to this wonderful product. So again, everybody, thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Happy holidays to all of you. Please stay warm. It's very terrifying out there. Stay bundled up, and stay healthy, and have, again, a lovely weekend and a lovely holiday.